Good evening. It is 5:30, so we're going to call the meeting to order. Remind you to turn your phones to silent or vibrate, and let's all stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Chris, would you take the roll, please?
Councilmember Berg. Here. Councilmember Dalby.
Here.
Councilmember Rowe.
Here.
Councilmember Stevens.
Here.
Councilmember Myers.
Here.
Mayor Lazio.
Here.
Items on the consent agenda. Minutes from regular meeting number 12 on April 21st, 2020 as presented. Approve the appointment of Chad Farrington to the position of Police Chief for the Ottumwa Police Department effective June 10th, 2020. Resolution number 53, 2020, setting a public hearing date for May 19th, 2020 on the council's intent to approve a purchase and development agreement with Christner Properties, LLC for the purchase of 310 East Main Street. Resolution number 79, 2020, setting May 19th, 2020 as the date of a public hearing on the disposition of city-owned property located at 310 North Moore. Resolution number 81, 2020, setting May 19th, 2020 as the date of a public hearing on the disposition of city-owned property located at 119 North Ward. Beer and/or liquor applications for Ottumwa Grocery LLC at 129 to 131 East 2nd Street, Los Palmas Bar and Grill Incorporated at 321 East 2nd Street, Fraternal Order of Eagles, Ottumwa number 114 at 109 South Green Street, all applications pending final inspections.
Move the consent agenda as presented.
Second. Thank you.
Councilmember Berg.
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby.
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe.
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens.
Yes.
Councilmember Myers.
Yes. Item C, I need an approval for tonight's agenda. Move approval of the agenda for tonight.
Second.
Thank you.
Councilmember Berg.
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby.
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe.
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens.
Yes.
Councilmember Myers.
Yes. Item D is a chance to hear from our city administrator, Phil Rath. So Phil, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. So we had some information coming out from the county regards to COVID-19 situation. And in the current state of things, some of the businesses and other entities that are able to open should they choose to do so. In accordance with the Wapello County Public Health, there's been some focus and questions upon information that can be released local public health agencies in regard to employer identification, relationship to positive cases of COVID-19. Local public health entities are working closely with the Iowa Department of Public Health on tracking and contact tracing for people who are positive. According to the IDPH guidance received from Amy McCoy, Media Relations, IDPH releases very limited identifiable information related to infectious disease investigations because the department is required by law to protect the identity of individuals and businesses involved in a disease outbreak, and references a section of Iowa Code. The name of a business or entity involved in an outbreak can be released to the public only if IDPH director or state medical director determines such a disclosure is necessary to protect the public. Dr. Caitlin Padati, the state medical director, has made the following determinations regarding disclosing identity of certain employers experiencing an outbreak. The employers, IDPH will release the name of an employer where there has been an outbreak, and that is considered as 10% absenteeism, or 10% of the workforce is a confirmed case or identified as a close contact in a single location of an employment setting which constitutes a high-risk environment for the potential of COVID transmission. Supplies to a congregate setting in which social distancing is impossible or impracticable, including but not limited to meatpacking plants, food and beverage processing plants, factories with production lines, and warehouses. Okay, so that was mentioned a little bit on the governor's comments earlier today, talking about that, and there were a list of entities that were identified that met that criteria. I will say that at current, Wapello County is one of the 77 counties that is available to be open with limitations, and businesses and religious institutions have to weigh that decision and make a choice on whether they want to open up to those limited criteria or remain closed. And those are choices that they have to make, weighing the safety of their employees, weighing the safety of the public that would visit. They are experiencing a new normal. They're going through reduced revenue opportunities by having to limit the amount of patrons, cutting that by half, distancing where people can sit in the restaurant. They're going to have increased costs. Whereas before you could reuse menus, they have to come up with new ways, and single-serve packages. The ketchup bottles won't be on the table because they'll have to go with single-serve packs. That increased costs that they didn't have before. So they have to weigh those decisions and weigh that against the ability for them to maintain their business beyond that, and being able to earn revenue to do that. On our part, as the public, I think when we feel that we also have a choice to make, do we look to enter those facilities or not? Those are decisions that we have to make when we go to the grocery store. We have to decide to do that or not. Practice social distancing where we can. And there's a number of facilities that have increased that, grocery stores that have one-way aisles and things to that effect. So make sure that we're following those, wearing protective personal equipment, masks, gloves, those things. Those are all things that we can do, making sure that we're being conscious of others. We may be fine, we may feel good, but we don't know if we're asymptomatic. We don't know the concerns that others may have and the health risks that they may carry. So making sure that we're also being socially conscious and doing our part. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Phil? Okay, let's move on to item E. We always provide an opportunity for citizens to comment on items on the agenda, and I think we have an individual, so Chief, you'll let him in. Good evening, Dennis.
Good evening. I'm Dennis Wilhoit, Chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. And I sent you a letter, dropped off a letter yesterday, and I just want to read through that and add a couple additional comments. This is in relationship to the H3 on the agenda, the approval of the moving forward with the build grant that involves the Historic Railroad District in Ballingall Park. Dear Mayor and City Council, I'm writing on behalf of the Ottumwa Historic Preservation Commission about Ballingall Park and the build grant application. Two of our Historic Preservation Commission members attended a meeting last October to discuss the preservation and redevelopment of Ballingall Park. The commission was invited to this meeting because the park is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. As a member of the Certified Local Government Program, one of the responsibilities of Ottumwa's Historic Preservation Commission is to consult on projects like this. As you know, the build grant is funded with federal dollars, and the commission has a formal consulting role in the project. During the meeting, we had questions and expressed concerns about the relocation of the locomotive, the appropriateness of the designated children's play area in the park, and the suggested aggregate concrete replacement material for the flagstones surrounding the fountain. We still have those concerns and look forward to working toward a mutually agreeable solutions for the preservation and redevelopment of Ballingall Park. We respectively remind the council members that as a certified local government, the Historic Preservation Commission needs to be at the table early in the process when historic resources are involved. We thank the city and the Legacy Foundation for including us in discussions last fall. We believe that the wider the circle, the more ideas heard, and the furtherance of community conversations are at the very heart of a successful community. Historic preservation is one of the cornerstones of community revitalization, and we are cheerleaders for the preservation, restoration, rehabilitation, and reconstruction of our historic resources. We applaud Streetscape that is currently underway and envision the day when blighted areas of our downtown have relationship to the developed areas and become harmonious to the eye. And that was the letter. And just in conclusion, I would like to add this evening, as you prepare to adopt or reject the resolution to proceed with the build grant, the Historic Preservation Commission simply wants to ensure that any permanent design decisions pertaining to this historic resource, which is listed on the National Registry as part of the historic railroad district, that any permanent design decisions are not included in this grant in any way that they may become irreversible. We look forward to working with our community development leaders in the early, middle, and late stages of all projects that have potential impact on the historic resources of our community. Also, just very quickly, special thanks. We have welcomed Councilperson Rowe as our council liaison, and so that's great to have him at our last meeting and in future meetings with the commission. And I remind all of you and the public at large that our monthly meetings are open to everyone, of course. We typically meet on the fourth Wednesday of each month, 6:30 p.m. here in the council chambers. Good health to all.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Are there any questions or comments? We'll be in touch, and we appreciate your input and certainly want to include the Historic Preservation Commission in the planning and development of this grant.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item F. Chris?
Bid review and contract award for asbestos removal at 319 West 5th Street. Recommendation: accept bid and award contract for asbestos removal at 319 West 5th Street to Dustin Smith of Environmental Edge of Ottumwa, Iowa for the sum of $3,700.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Tonight we have Zach Simonson with us, so Zach, you have the floor.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. 319 West 5th is a formerly abandoned property that the city acquired under Iowa Code Section 657A. We attempted to sell the property in March, and there were no bidders interested in purchasing the property. It was determined with the inspectors and city attorney and other interested folks that the responsible course of action was demolition, and the council had a public hearing and opened up bids for asbestos removal and demolition. Those bids were accepted until 2 p.m. on April 28th, 2020. We received 3 bids for asbestos removal, and Dustin Smith's was the best bid with a sum of $3,700. Staff recommends awarding the contract to Dustin Smith.
Any questions for Zach? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Bid review and contract award for demolition of 319 West 5th Street. Recommendation: accept bid and award contract for demolition and disposal of the structures located at 319 West 5th Street to Tim Skinner Trucking of Ottumwa, Iowa for the sum of $11,950.
Move the recommendations presented.
Second.
Thank you, Matt. Go ahead, Zach.
This is the same property at 319 West 5th. Bids were again accepted until 2 p.m. on April 28th, 2020. We did receive again 3 bids. In this case, Tim Skinner Trucking was the best demolition bid for a sum of $11,950, and the staff recommends awarding Tim Skinner Trucking the contract.
Any questions for Zach? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, Zach.
Approve the proposal for professional services from Veenstra and Kim to prepare a nutrient reduction report for the water pollution control facility. Recommendation: approve the proposal for professional services from Veenstra and Kim for the amount not to exceed $18,700.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Good evening, Larry. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. In support of the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy, we are obligated to prepare and submit a report that evaluates the feasibility and reasonableness of reducing the amounts of nitrogen, phosphorus discharge into the surface waters. The report will describe and evaluate operational changes to the existing facilities, new or additional treatment technologies to reduce the amount of total nitrogen and total phosphorus discharge. These options will be then evaluated for reasonableness by looking at, among other things, changes to the removal of other pollutants and the impacts on the user rates. Upon completion of the study, a legal review will be completed by John Hall and Associates, and then a preferred option will be chosen and presented to Iowa Department of Natural Resources. 2 proposals were submitted for professional service. Veenstra Kim offered the lowest not to exceed price. The proposals are attached.
Any questions for Larry?
Just one thought, if I may.
Go ahead, Bob.
Larry, so you mentioned John Hall and this nutrient certification stuff, but he's one of the persons that we met with in Washington DC that you feel is one of the leading experts in this area?
That's correct. We want to look at what is actually required regulatory-wise, legally, and what is guidance. A lot of these type of regulatory issues have long-range financial impacts and operating costs from the time you install them on.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Your Honor, I just got a quick question.
Go ahead.
Larry, nutrient reduction was really kind of a new thing to me when I came on the council. I know that we've talked about it before. Is the report that we're doing in our other cities, is this a mandate by the Iowa DNR? And this could probably, do you foresee any major changes coming out of these reports? Because I know they told us for a while, we'll kind of do the best we can and make an effort. But I was wondering if this is their first phase of getting cities to reduce that. Is this report required?
It is required. It's in our discharge permit, our 5-year permit that was renewed, I believe, last year. It is a requirement to be completed prior to the end of that permit, and then any of the findings and through the other process, our legal process, would probably be included in the following renewal of our discharge permit.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, take the roll, please.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Thank you, Larry.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2020 HMA PCC Street Crack Repair Program.
Okay.
This project is one of our annual preventative maintenance programs and consists of sealing street cracks throughout the city of Ottumwa. I listed the streets and where we're going to seal different streets. What we do is we set a unit price contract. We actually go through, and if it's 50,000 feet, whatever it happens to be, depending on the unit price per foot, we'll complete a street. And that's kind of how this works. We look at more of our recent overlays that we've done in order to extend the life of a mat, the actual HMA mat. This is a little bit different than the street crack seal. Bids will be received and opened by the city of Ottumwa on May 20th, 2020, 2 p.m. And a bid report and bid award recommendation will be presented at the council meeting on June 2nd, 2020, or a later date determined by staff. Again, we budget $50,000 from the expanded street repair program.
This is a public hearing, and we do have, since we're still honoring the governor's recommendations, we do have a phone line that people can call in. That number is 683-4581. If there's anyone in the audience that wants to address this issue, now's the time to let us hear from you. Chris, I just want for the record, did you receive any written or verbal comments?
No objections are received.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Resolution number 93, 2020, approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2020 HMA PCC Street Crack Repair Program. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 93, 2020.
Move the recommendations presented.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions for Larry? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2020 Sanitary Utility Access Program.
This is a public hearing, so Larry, you have the floor.
This project will place sanitary utility accesses in existing sanitary lines and associated patchwork. Manholes will be replaced at locations that have either limited access points or problem areas prone to plugging, causing increased cleaning maintenance. Bids will be received and opened by the City of Ottumwa on May 20th, 2020 at 2 p.m. And a bid report and bid award recommendation will be presented at the City Council meeting on June 2nd, 2020, or at a later date as determined by staff. Again, this is one of our annual programs, and we budget $50,000 from the sewer fund each year.
This is a public hearing, so again, if anybody wants to call in or if we have anybody that has submitted any written comments,
No objections were received.
we'll give a minute or two for people to respond and then move on. While we're waiting, Larry, it might be appropriate at some future meeting to give us a little update on a new piece of equipment that will help you in the process of putting in some manholes and show the council what your team has put together. I think that program I saw the other morning was really good.
We're going to actually wait until we do another street and then do a little video of it and bring it in. We could show the one from online YouTube, but we kind of wanted to incorporate our crews in a local street
Great.
and actually and do a little presentation to show the public and the council what this tool can do.
Very good. Okay. All right, not having heard it from anybody, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Resolution number 94, 2020, approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2020 Sanitary Utility Access Program. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 94, 2020.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Thank you, Bob. Any questions for Larry? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2020 Sidewalk Drop and Detectable Warning Installation Program.
Public hearing, so Larry, you have the floor.
This is the 9th contract and consists of the installation of sidewalk drops and detectable warnings at various locations throughout the City of Ottumwa. The completion of these sidewalk drops and detectable warnings will be a step towards compliance with our ADA transition plan. The transition plan was approved by council on August 7th, 2012. The city-owned and maintained intersections are one portion of the ADA requirement. The overall project was originally estimated at $1,280,000 and is budgeted $120,000 each year until we complete it. Bids will be received and opened by the City of Ottumwa on May 20th, 2020 at 2 p.m. and the bid report and bid award recommendation will be presented to City Council on June 2nd, 2020, or at a later date as determined by staff. I have listed the previous contracts. One of the things that I want to point out on this, this has been kind of a juggling routine over the last 9 years, trying to anticipate where we're separating, how many handicap drops are going to be included in the separated areas. So we know that at the end of the 10-year, we'll probably have a 1-year cleanup to go back around and catch everything that's outside of our project areas. The one thing that we strive to do is try to avoid putting these in and then having to remove it with the separation of the sewers. Of course, nobody wants to spend money and tear it out in the next 5 or 6 years. So that's one of the things that we've worked to avoid. And by, I think, extending this, in the end, a small contract to catch those orphans is the best use of our money. I will point out that somehow last year's CIP bond issue did not include this. So this year we'll be paying for it out of the road use, and then we're going to determine if we pick that up with the next bond cycle. So there will be a budget amendment needed in the future. And again, then Kayla can explain how we'll shift the monies if we leave it in the road use or not.
This is a public hearing. If there's anybody that wants to comment, did you receive any written or verbal comments?
Received no objections.
So I'll just weigh in real quick here as far as, so the amendment that's referred to will be picked up as part of the rest of the amendment process at the meeting sometime in June. So we'll pick it up at that point.
Hearing no public comment, let's have a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Second?
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Resolution number 95, 2020, approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2020 sidewalk drop and detectable warning installation program. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 95, 2020.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation is presented, Your Honor.
Second.
Thank you.
I have a comment, Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Myers.
Mr. Seals, by policy, even beyond being ADA compliant, Public Works, you automatically, and you kind of hit it on streetscape and stuff, but anytime we have a project, city has a project of reconstruction or new construction, you automatically build into that the sidewalk drops, correct?
That's correct. That's actually required through the ADA. If we actually go past, used to overlays were excluded, you could mill and fill and not have to adjust them. Now you do. So, and I forget if it's been 3 or 4 years since that particular item was changed, but we always include them. Those we would stay out of if they're in our long-range street replacement plan with this program.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please take the roll.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2020 asphalt street repair program.
This is another public hearing, so Larry, you have the floor again.
This project is for our annual asphalt repair program, which started in 2003 and is used to set a unit price contract. The work will consist of overlay on various streets in the city. Staff has reviewed the sewer conditions and the ADA requirements for each of these streets listed below. Ottumwa Waterworks plans on installing a new main or improvements on Silverwood Lane prior to the overlay. Bids were received and opened by the City of Ottumwa on May 20th, 2020 at 2 p.m. The bid report and bid award recommendation will be presented at the City Council meeting on June 2nd, 2020, or at a later date as determined by staff. I did list the streets. We also put up just a visual. One of the things we do in our unit price contract, it's let with tonnage ranges, say 100 tons to 200 is a unit price, 200 to 400, and that's not the actual ranges, but that's how we do this contract. And what we try to do is bunch the streets together that we want to do in order to get that larger quantity, which typically has a lower price because they have the same mobilization, same equipment, stuff like that. But as they lay more tons on a project, of course, their price per ton goes down. I do want to point out on Ferry Street, we're just going to do about 4 foot on each edge and try to get more service life out of the center of the mat. On Richmond, it is the areas in between where we did concrete sections for the separation in previous years. That'll clean up those corridors and give you a good ride surface into the future.
Okay. At this point, do we have any written or verbal comments from the public?
No objections were received.
Having no public comment, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Resolution number 96, 2020, approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2020 asphalt street repair program. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 96, 2020.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions for Larry?
Your Honor, I've got a quick question.
Go ahead, Matt.
There's a section, I believe it would be just west of the roundabout there, that's pretty, on Richmond, that it's pretty, due to the roundabout, I mean, construction has gotten worse. Is that something that might be able to be,
We can
done?
look at that and see if it merits adding, because in the past, depending on our final cost, total tonnage, we've done second rounds,
Right.
and it might be something, and you are correct, that took quite a beating during roundabout construction, that warrants taking a look at.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens.
Yes.
Councilmember Myers.
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2020 chip seal program.
Again, this is a public hearing, so Larry, you have the floor.
This project is for the application of a chip and seal coating to existing HMA overlay streets in an attempt to extend their life expectancy. This process includes sealing and patching the existing pavement surface, applying an asphalt emulsion coat, and then topping with a pea gravel wearing course surface. In the late 90s, the product was applied to several streets throughout the city with great results. Examples include North Court, Church Street, Chester Avenue, Ward Street, and a few others. We've selected an area in which the average HMA surface is 15 years old. By applying the seal coat, we should be able to extend the useful life, possibly another 15 years, as long as you have no base failures underneath. The streets that we have selected are listed on this. We also provided a visual. And again, this is another one for this type of operation. If you can cluster your streets together, you get a lot better unit price per yard. The project is estimated to include 14,820 square yards of chip and seal at an estimated cost of $76,331. Bids will be received and opened by the city of Ottumwa on May 20th, 2020 at 2 p.m. And a bid report and bid award recommendation will be presented to the council on June 6, 2020, or at a later date is determined by staff. Funding will come from the expanded street repair program.
Chris, I'd ask the same question. Has there been any public comment?
I would like to show one short thing. If you
Sure.
can kick the video. I know a lot of you are new. Skip was here when they invented chip and seal, so he's familiar with it. And this is just for the general public that hasn't seen it. One of the things that we do, we get a lot of complaints when the loose gravel is on there. It's kind of interesting because you put more pea gravel on than you need to cover the oil, just to keep oil off of cars. We will receive complaints, if you have people that spin in the gravel and cut back down to the emulsion tacks up. It's thermal setting, so when the temperature drops, it kind of gets more solid. The traffic actually helps work the gravel in further. This is just a short minute video that kind of gives you the overview. They do come in after the fact, sweep up the loose gravel. Like I said, they put more pea gravel than they need, and that's just to keep it from tracking and tacking up. And it's a really quick operation. This is not speeded up. That's actual rate of application. He might be sped up. And what we're looking at is a lot of these mats with some of the newer mixes and the changes in the binders, we get a lot of reflective cracking. If there's actual panel movement below, it's not going to stop anything like that. It does give you, it does seal all of the small alligator type cracking. It's far cheaper than trying to crack seal, depending on the number of surface imperfections in the mat itself.
No objections were
No
received on this
objections?
item.
Okay. Then I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Bob.
Councilmember Berg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens,
Yes.
Councilmember Myers.
Yes.
Resolution number 97, 2020, approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2020 chip seal program. Recommendation, pass and adopt resolution number 97, 2020.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions for Larry?
I have one, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Larry, what's the difference in price between asphalt and this chip and seal?
Well, this goes on. It's hard to compare. Asphalt's been running small quantity, can be as high as 120 a ton, just depending on binder cost and your mix design. This stuff they put on, I don't remember if it's a half a gallon a square yard or what rate they actually apply it. And then your real expense is coming up with washed pea gravel. But you'll see, I think we estimated, if I put that in here. Give me a second, I can tell you. So somewhere around $5 a yard to put chip and seal on. Asphalt, you'd have to lay, the problem with trying to do like a micro overlay where it's 1.5 inches, it doesn't hold up, it chips out, it doesn't bond with the actual asphalt. So when we do an overlay, it's fairly typical to be at least 3 inches, if not 4 inches. So then you have to look at the cost for.
Okay. So aside from
$35 a square yard.
I'm assuming that the life is probably not as long as asphalt, or am I backwards on that?
Well, actually, again, it depends on your base. We seen this stuff on North Court, and I think it was put on in the early 2000s. And we've got a lot of wear out of that because that mat was in pretty bad shape. It actually extended its life, nearly 20 years. We're looking at mostly just light residential, and it doesn't have the commercial traffic as North Court would. And it's far cheaper than trying to do just a sand seal coat that doesn't really have a wear surface on it.
Okay, thank you.
I'll put those numbers together, though, as what it would cost for like a 3 or a 4 inch overlay versus chip and seal.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I have just a comment. It looked to me like on that slide you showed, it appeared like they were showing chip and seal at 2 or 3 inches deep, and that's not the case. Chip and seal, Mark, is about 3/8 of an inch deep. An asphalt overlay, like he said, is 3 or 4 inches deep. The chip and seal is only a wearing surface.
And the real advantage is to extend and save the existing mat. Asphalt typically lasts 15 to 20 years, depending on traffic, depending on, is it a full depth asphalt? Is it an overlay on PCC? Depending on your mix design. If you get 15 years, you just start having a lot more maintenance cost. There's no standard anymore, but maybe at 10 years, you're going to do some heavy crack sealing. At 15, you might have to do something like this to extend it on into the 25, 30-year range from the original overlay.
So I guess just one follow-up question. Given the cost effectiveness of this and the longevity of its life cycle, why hasn't the city been doing that in the past? Is this something that's just making a resurgence now, or?
Well, just reviewing different methods. We started we didn't really even have a preventative maintenance program 10 years ago. We started in with crack sealing of the older or the newer mats, I guess, backwards, trying to extend their life. There's a point that the mats are in such poor condition, you don't invest any more money. You look at, can you get another 5, 6 years, 8 years out of that surface before you look at, do you do a mill and fill on the street? Do you do a full street replacement? What do you have underground for utilities? I mean, there's a lot of things. Should that be used more? We're going to look in that direction.
Okay, awesome, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens.
Yes.
Councilmember Myers.
Yes.
Thank you, Larry.
Resolution number 78, 2020, reserve $100,000 to cover costs associated with Bridgeview Center due to lost revenue related to COVID-19. Recommendation defeat resolution number 78, 2020.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
You may recall the last meeting, that motion and resolution was tabled, so that's why we're bringing it up again tonight. Are there any questions for staff or any of the guests?
And I'll just say that there is a later resolution addressing this issue, but is slightly different than this current resolution. So the recommendation therefore is to defeat this one and then take whatever action the council sees fit on the later resolution.
Okay. All right, clear then, ready to vote? Take the roll.
Councilmember Byrd?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Resolution number 86, 2020, accept a gift of real estate from Josh and Brandy Lunt located at 315 North Jefferson, Ottumwa, Iowa. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 86, 2020.
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Kevin, you're addressing this?
Thank you, Your Honor. The city was in the process of condemning this structure located at 315 North Jefferson. The owners, Josh and Brandy Lunt, are interested in donating the property to the city. The property has been placarded since July 21st, 2016, and the owners have been unable to sell it in order to have it renovated. The owners will bring real estate taxes current to the date of possession, and this will allow the city to move more quickly in demolition and removal. The council would need to authorize the mayor to sign any documents necessary to finalize acceptance of this gift.
Any questions for Kevin? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Byrd?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Resolution number 90, 2020, resolution of commitment to apply for the West Main Multimodal Corridor Revitalization Project Build Grant. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 90, 2020.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Okay, Kevin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is the culmination of many years of planning, many hours of hard work, and by many partners of the city. Of course, the Legacy Foundation, most notable, as well as many others. Our historic board, earlier represented, was involved to some extent as well, and several other boards and commissions and members of those governing bodies were also involved with us on the Bill Grant Committee. Tonight we have with us Brad Grief, our regional planner. He's going to do a presentation on the Bill Grant. Brad is of course writing our narrative for the grant, and so tonight is a very big night for us. And so without further ado, I'll let Brad go ahead and present the grant.
Thank you, Kevin. Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
Basically, I know that you guys, and we've been discussing this project in general terms over the last year and a half specifically. But planning for this goes back at least as far as 2011, the starting figures on this. A lot of public participation, a lot of meetings, Sorry, boss. I'm running over my time. But basically what we're looking at here, does this work? Can't really see. We're looking at a giant area, what we're calling a corridor that connects. Basically, it starts at the train depot, does some enhancements there. We picked that site because Amtrak itself is planning on doing a whole renovation of their platform area. So basically what we're doing is capitalizing off of their investments and starting there and then radiating out into the city and basically getting our downtown, all the stuff that we've done on the east end, connected to the west end, connected to the river, which gets us all the way out into the trails in the community. So what is a build grant? I know you guys have discussed this a little bit, but it's an acronym for Better Utilizing Investments to Leverage Development. Probably heard this called TIGER for the previous 10 years. I know that Burlington got a $17 million TIGER grant that has a lot of the similar characteristics of our grant back in 2017. And they're just kind of starting to get into the real nitty gritty construction stuff right now. They kind of did like we are doing. They submitted some rough plans. I mean, they've been sanded down with some, heavy grit sandpaper, so it's not just rocks. But there's a lot of detail that's going to have to come after we get the grant. But what we need is basically an idea, a good solid concept where we can draw cost estimates, and then we can get to the grant application phase. And then when we get the grant, then that's when we refine all the details, go through the NEPO, the SHPO, and all that other technical stuff. So build grants are a discretionary grant program through the United States Department of Transportation. In fiscal year 2020, they've allocated $1 billion, and half of that goes to urban communities and half goes to rural communities. We classify as rural because they upped the population to 200,000 this year, and it was a lot smaller in previous years, but instead of being due in July like we had been planning for, this is due May 18th. So that's why we haven't quite sanded down a little finer than we had planned to. But I think we got a really good project, as you'll kind of see in their notice of funding opportunity. That's that last bullet and sub bullet point is verbatim out of there. That's what they're looking to do. They're looking to improve infrastructure condition, access to public health and safety, promote regional connectivity through multiple modes of transportation, and then facilitate economic growth. Like, how can all those transportation investments lead to economic development in that area and then throughout your community? And they said they're kind of focusing on rural areas, which I don't necessarily understand that, because if half of it's has to go to the urban ones anyway, and it's a stupid thing that they put in there. So here's our project area back in 1964 when the Wapello Street Bridge was being constructed. You notice the Market Street parking lot is actually being used to near capacity. That's because they actually had a whole bunch of buildings downtown and they didn't have more than one or two interior surface parking lots. Sometime in the 70s and 80s, we decided it'd be a good idea to demolish half our downtown and leave it nice and barren. So that's what we have today, with a bunch of pavement and one-story buildings that are starting to deteriorate themselves. So here's and I've got a bigger picture at the end, and this is obviously going to be available for y'all to take a look at. But we've got 10 basic activities that we're looking at doing. The first 5 kind of go together and then in a phase. Then the second 3 go together in a phase, and then 10 goes up with the first phase, and then Market Street is kind of the end of it. But what we're looking to do here is basically in keeping with the historic preservation and the historic nature of the depot. It does need exterior improvements. The windows need to either be replaced or repaired. The tuck pointing needs to be shored up. The windows or the doors and all that stuff on the main level are starting to fall apart. And it's in decent shape, but it needs to be repaired if we want to keep it for the next few generations. And then the interior improvements, what we're talking about is modernizing the, trying to keep the character of how it is now, but, you know, adding some decent seating in there, adding some, the video, or not the video, but the kiosks that you can, you know, order tickets from either Amtrak or Burlington Trailways, and, you know, find ways to make it more convenient for people to actually use our systems, especially since we don't have a bus or Amtrak station agent anymore. Those were both killed in 2017. Going out from the depot, going out toward Bollingal Park, do some improvements there, mainly keeping the character of what we're doing. We had SHPO, actually, the head of SHPO came down and met with a group of people. I think the mayor was there. I know it was in the depot building where their meeting was, so there was certainly opportunity for someone to ride the elevator downstairs and have a chat. If you take a look at number 2, what we're going to kind of do there, I guess. There we go. We're actually going to kind of make it more like it originally was designed in the 1950s. It never got built the way it was originally designed, but that little spot over there on Washington Street extended. Kind of turned into kind of a no man's land. And then we put River Drive in as a 4-lane kind of freeway through there. Now with the quiet zones there, it doesn't really make sense to have 4 lanes going to a dead end that, you know, semis can't even use. So what we're basically trying to do here is make a whole bunch of functionality improvements that, you know, get better sidewalks, get actually another dozen parking spaces for the Historical Museum area. You'll note that the Historical Museum's property line is actually underneath the awning, where some of their folks park now isn't even their property, it's BNSF property. So, and their property line ends, basically the only parking that they've got is there between the museum and the clubhouse that's dedicated to them. So a lot of what we're trying to do here is make additional parking that is public parking so that they can actually have more functionality in the depot itself. So whether that becomes owned by, you know, a private individual or some nonprofit or whatever, the ultimate goal is to make a better structure that'll last for a lot longer and have, you know, additional functionality and some parking for it. And then again, the park design is keeping the original intent. The way the designers put this together, this is actually the 2nd edition. I had to poo-poo the first one because it was trying to go back to the 1800s version of what we had down here. That's not the historic district. That's not the historic character of it. So I got them back to this. So there has been some redesign and historic preservation consideration already done and redesigned into this. So I've done enough of these federal grants downtown especially that I know what can and can't pass. So I've been kind of leaning hard against the designers, against their will, to create things that are more passable for, you know, both the HPC and SHPO. You'll notice down here, it's really hard to read, but down here, number 5 is your bus station, where we want to move the bus station from Market and Main down to River Drive so they can queue all up there in a row. Where we've got it now, isn't going to be available for that kind of parking and staging anymore because we're putting more parking spaces in for the downtown businesses to use. So what we're trying to do is get the bus station down along River Drive and then get a nice bus station that complements our existing train canopies. You'll notice the little fine details in there. Those match the historic character of the whole district as well. And go back here a little bit. You can see kind of why we're looking at doing some of this stuff. The parking lot, especially there next to the depot where the long-term parking for Amtrak is also shared. Well, the paved part is the 226 West Main folks. And the BNSF actually owns the Amtrak long-term parking, and you can see that nice reflection there that they don't maintain it. It's that picture up in the upper right. You can see how dark it is at night. Amtrak comes in here at 6:50 every night. And for 2/3 of the year, that means they're coming here after dark. And if that's what we're welcoming our folks to, that's not a really good, secure way to visit Ottumwa. Or leave your car if you're trying to travel out of here. I know that I didn't leave my car there when I took Amtrak. I had someone drop me off. And Marion Street's kind of the same way. It's in ditch repair. The water department needs to put a new water main up through there and over on up through Main Street and connect to the current project that we've got. So that's the other reason why we're looking at this area and focusing on that. So everything here is really integrated and flows along together. Again, the streets that we're doing are going to be similar to what we're doing in the 100 to 200 or 300 blocks of East Main Street, except the permeable stuff that we're talking about putting in is actually in the parking areas. It's not on the drive lane or in the intersections. So that should, help for a little bit reduced maintenance long-term, help with the longevity of the system. And then we're not putting in the actual bioswales like we did, but we are putting vegetation in there just to make it more comfortable for folks to walk and, keep the temperature of our downtown cooler in the summer. And what we're talking about is a fun term called a sharrow. It's basically making a bike lane out of a normal drive lane. It just is a piece of a stenciled painted line on the street that says, "Hey motorist, this is also a zone that we have targeted for bicyclists." When we're done with this project, again, we're looking more toward 2027 as full build out. By that time, we'll have almost the entire way from the fork at West 2nd, where Main Street comes off, all the way to basically Romer Avenue, repaved, and we'll have some sort of pedestrian or dedicated bike trail on it. So that's a full route through town. And Larry just talked about the ADA drops that you're doing. That program, these bike lanes or these sharrows will connect to those sidewalks, and we'll have all the way to city limits, pedestrian friendly through downtown at the end of this. And then the other big thing that we're looking at from a safety perspective is this Market Street It's a mess right there at Market Street and the railroad tracks and River Drive and where it goes into those two parking lots. They don't line up. The whole idea of one of the big themes of a build grant is safety. Obviously, if we can enhance the intersection with the two parking lots, enhance the intersection with the railroad track so that pedestrians aren't coming off of the east side of Market Street and and walking straight into a turn lane, giving some sort of definition to where the pedestrian versus vehicular corridors are. And again, when we get that done, they'll have a nice, basically dedicated connection all the way from the heart of downtown all the way out past the Oxbow Business District. And eventually, around the park and all that other stuff out to Quincy. So This is really just kind of the starting point of all these other projects that are going to come, in the next 15 to 20 years. So let's get down to your project costs. Final design and engineering is, we kind of broke these down into major components to try to figure out how we wanted to pay for things or and whatnot. So at the right there, that table shows you kind of where we landed, assuming basically this is what your city staff has come up with and talked to me about. You're looking at putting $1 million in for a 5-year construction build out. So you're only going to throw in theoretically $200,000 a year to get $18.16 million worth of projects. We have the waterworks. They're going to need to do that those water projects anyway at some point in time. That's just the cost of the water improvements. That doesn't include the demolition. That doesn't include the paving. That doesn't include getting rid of stuff. So basically, we just said you're going to pay for the lines and the installation of them, and then the build grant will pay for everything on top. And that's what we kind of came up with for the city side of things. We said, the city would pay for part of the sanitary and storm sewer to get to that $1 million. Legacy, they've already done quite a bit of legwork on hiring consultants and helping get this grant to this place. So I'm told that they would put $1 million toward the final design engineering and then the construction testing and inspection pieces as well. Kevin recently had a conversation with 1015 Transit and said they would like to throw in $50,000 for that bus station. So that's awesome. And then I think there's $500,000 in other grants. I think there's more than that, but there's $500,000 in 4 other grants that I've identified that we could do, especially for the depot, the historic preservation piece. And those grants would be actually a lot more strict than the feds would be to get that money. So that should help calm those nerves as well. So here's your projects again. And I guess I'll leave it up to any questions or concerns that you've got.
Any questions for either Kevin or Brad?
I just have a couple of comments.
Go ahead, Mr. Rowe.
Kevin, we had a meeting yesterday in which you had mentioned, and Brad alluded to this pretty directly here just a second ago. Assuming we didn't chase this grant opportunity and look to invest this $1 million in this grant, we're potentially looking over the next few years, by the looks of those estimates, about $3.1 million that the city and Waterworks would have to invest. That's correct, right?
That is correct.
So even looking at just this piece in particular, this is a rather good buy for the city of Ottumwa, just in the fact that we're only cutting in a piece of what we're going to need anyway at some point in the future.
That is true. We're taking on a lot of underground work here. There's a lot of infrastructure work. There's a lot of street work we're going to be taking care of that in the long-term view of it, 10 to 15 years would have to be done. And of course, when we look at these situations, we look at the current outlook on bonding initiatives and the like. There's never going to be a more affordable time to do public improvements. And of course, the future dollar being more expensive than the present one. I think that's a very good point, is we're taking on some deferred maintenance too. We're also providing opportunities for private owners along that route, just as we have with the streetscape, to take advantage of the work that we're doing and to get the pretty good deals on it in improving their infrastructure into their actual private structures and properties. So there's lots of advantage to that, yes.
Okay. So, and one of the issues that I have heard from a few different people at this point in time is obviously, the city's under a lot of financial constraints at the moment. And again, this was a question that was asked last night, and I'm hoping that you can reassure the public at this point that we're not at a point yet that we're actually spending this money. We actually have to wait on the build grant to even be approved and granted to us. That's correct, right?
That is correct. We'll be finding out about the grant here in the next few months after we put it in, of course, before. Yes, September is the date that we'll be finding out whether or not we get the grant. But when you look at the grant timeline, you're looking at 2027 as the end point for all your activities that will be included in your grants to take place. Of course, we have our timeline up now, but you have 10 major objectives. We have staggered those major objectives so that the city's matching money, Legacy's matching money, and the like can be staggered towards the end of our project. So if we're looking at bonding initiatives for our portion or share on the project, we can kick those out to 2023, 4, 5, maybe even 6. We're trying to wrap up in our narrative, in our minds, our narrative, we're wrapping up in 2026, about midway through or towards the end of that construction season. So we're giving ourselves a fair amount of time to complete what are the objectives, and also making sure that any impacts we have in a fiscal manner when it comes to our bonding initiative or ever how we do decide to fund our grant initiative, we're taking that into consideration in a long-term perspective.
Okay. And one of the items in the cost breakdown included $500,000 worth of other grants. What happens if we do receive the build grant, and we're just going to assume the full build grant at this point, but we don't receive the other $500,000 worth of grants? Who makes up that difference?
That's another excellent question. I think anytime you go into something, especially something as many-parted as this grant application, you have to be prepared to understand that you may not receive full funding on the grant. You may not receive other grants that you're kind of planning to go in to combine with your funding apparatus. So if we don't, we have to review what we are awarded in the grant. I'm talking about the build grant now, not the other grants. We'd have to examine what we were awarded there. We'd have to scale back our projects with an understanding of what kind of funding that we had available to us, especially if we didn't get those other grants either. The other grants are sort of going to be more targeted, probably with a little bit of specificity to projects that are included within the grant. The public or private initiatives going along with the private initiatives are helping to fund the public ones. But we would have to pull our project back to fit that capacity, our capacity for spending. And we've already done that a little bit during the project, kind of putting some things to the side that we'd first hoped to include in the project in our 10 public objectives, but we weren't able to. So we're prepared to do that.
Okay. So with the build grant itself, if we're not awarded the full allotment of money that we're requesting, what happens to the $1 million? Does that scale back, or does that stay at $1 million even though we haven't been awarded the entire amount from the build grant?
Yes, part of the thing going in with a grant, any grant, is when you come in with the grants with match included in your application, once we agree to accept the grant, we're going to have to agree to perform what is our match that's included in the narrative of the grant. So I think we're going to have to weigh our objectives. We're going to have to weigh the kind of money that we receive, if we receive any, right? And we're going to have to look at our priorities within the grant and say, okay, now given that we, instead of getting $14.4 million, maybe it's $8.2 million. Okay, what are the priorities? What do we believe we can accomplish with this? Is it now still worth accepting this grant that's been offered to us for the match that we know we have in it, the dedication that provides to us over the term of the grant, the advantages that you mentioned earlier? Are all these things weighed to make it, quote, worth it to still match at that level we are and to accept the grant? That's a choice we'll have to make, hopefully. We will actually be awarded some measure and be able to make that choice. But.
And just make sure my memory is correct on this. The way it stands right now with what we're proposing, we're looking at a buy-in of about 14 cents on the dollar. Is that correct? Was that the number that was shot?
The $1 million out of 18.1 would be 5.5 cents.
Okay. Okay.
Now the portion that we're talking about, like the city would be the million out of about 2.5 is about 40 cents on the dollar, or 40%, just on the sanitary and storm sewer.
Okay.
So.
Perfect. And just one last thing, and I know other people have questions as well. Just to reiterate Mr. Wilhoit's point earlier, there will be involvement because there is property down there that will be affected because of the historic status of the area. They will be included in the conversations going forward, correct?
Absolutely. The train station is, of course, it's the center of our transportation-oriented district, our TOD. It's the center of what is the imagination of the multimodal nature of the grant. It has always been our concern that we maintain the historical character of our building, that we stay on the historical registry, that in every way that we prosecute our initiatives during this project, we are paying attention to what is the historical antiquity of our downtown, trying to complement that. Of course, we're setting up a group, our architectural review group on our public-private initiatives. There's about 5 or 6 of those in here to go along with these 10 major public objectives. There's 5 or 6 public-private partnerships that we hope to perform. In those, we're going to look at architectural examination on a historical level, try to match the antiquity and character of the rest of our downtown. And of course, anything we do during the process, we plan on preserving what we have there, the gem that we have that is our train station. We're kind of looking at the European model of function and antiquity coupling together.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from council?
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr. Myers.
Yeah, if I may, just a couple of thoughts, but I support totally this applying for the grant. And one of the reasons a lot of you heard over the years that I comment about the League of Cities and our opportunity each year to visit various cities. And one of the major things that I've seen over cities that how have they developed, whether it's Mason City, whether it's Burlington, Clinton, some of the others that are our size, they've gone after infrastructure money. They've gone after state and federal dollars. And so when we can put this grant forward and know that on every dollar, the city is somewhere responsible for a nickel, and that means we're getting 95 cents on every dollar for infrastructure development for cities. Then you look at those cities and you see, how is it they're developing? It's because they've taken advantage of those types of things. Thank you.
That's exactly right. And we're availing ourselves of so many opportunities for improvement along the way in this. The Build Grant is a lot of things. It is true to your point. It's infrastructure work. It's transportation oriented. It's economic development. It's health, safety, and welfare of our public and our citizens. It's improving their quality of lives. It's hard to say how much the transformational change that this could bring to downtown area. We don't really know the overall ending impact of what this beginning 18.1 million could mean. It could mean, in my mind, I was talking, had a conversation with my wife over the weekend, and I was going all of the many details, including the private initiatives and the businesses you may see in those. I mean, it could be as much as an $80 million impact in this area immediately adjacent. To your point again, as so many communities otherwise have done before us with the Riverwalk initiatives, just providing a lot of opportunities for visitors and citizens alike here, and setting the pathway for us in our downtown area and our Riverway far into the future multi-generational project.
And the overall cost benefit analysis was 3.1 is what it already came out to, with some additional stuff that we added in there, and I haven't gotten the final CBA yet from Eastern Campus.
That's right. 3.13, I think, was our last measure on the cost benefit analysis. So that's wonderful as well. I mean, you're really getting the bang for your buck all the way around on this project.
Other questions or comments? I want to remind the public that this is purely authorization for the council to submit the grant application, that anything that would result if there was an award would come back to the council. And as you've all mentioned, we'd have to have a lot of negotiations with various partners and projects to finalize the grant, and that would be done publicly too.
Extremely important point. We do have 10 major public public projects here, objectives. And yeah, they will all have to come back through a process, back through council. The 5 or 6 public or public-private partnerships that we're hoping to put together would have to as well. We'd be approving development agreements for those and other matters. So very good point.
I think in the spirit of openness and transparency, I know the council did receive a letter from a Mr. William Farley who expressed some very strong feelings about, real estate ventures and the risky nature. And I just want to be clear that I'm not supporting or denying, but just want to recognize he did take the time to send a well-written letter to us, and we are acknowledging that as part of our record. But I think, again, this is a great opportunity. We've got to have a vision for the future moving forward, and when you can do this kind of a project on somebody else's dime, great opportunity, and we should take advantage. And this is the last real discretionary money that the federal government has given to cities. So we, like everybody else, are looking for other sources of funding. So it's a great chance for us to do some great projects downtown that we would have to do eventually anyway. I think that's another key. Some of the infrastructure down there goes back quite a ways and would have to be replaced. So it's purely a starting point. We're by no means finished, and nothing is final. This is all concept, and I personally want to thank Brad for his leadership with the committee. We've had a lot of people involved in this project, and it's been a moving object, but you've done a nice job of pulling together the narrative, so we appreciate that, Brad. Okay.
Your Honor, I had a comment and a question about this, and I know
Go
we're
ahead,
applying.
Matt.
Well, thank you. I know we're applying or giving our okay to continue the application process. I know recently we were, called into question about why now is this an appropriate time? And I think Brad spoke to that with the deadline of the grant, being in May now. And I totally disagree with that. I mean, I understand, the situation that we're in exceptionally, both financially and with this COVID-19 epidemic. But, government has to keep moving forward, and we have to keep the, progress moving as best we can, pending all the issues get worked out. I did notice that one of our partners in the funding was 1015 Transit. I just want to say that's, after the, transit situation we went through, that's nice to see them come through on board as a partner and such a, a solid amount of money. So hats off to 1015 Transit. One other thing, and this is more of a question. Those are my comments. This is just a question. Brad, cited the owners of the museum when he was talking here. And full disclosure, I was a former board member of that organization, and I feel it's inappropriate if I spoke to anything we discussed at the board level at that time. But it has been, several months since I've been there. And they had posted a social media post that just gave me the impression that somehow they may not be totally on board with this project. So can't understand why. It's a great project, super for the depot. My question is, if that assumption on my part is correct, how would that make the grant look in the future if they were not, or if one partner was not on board with this, or a private owner of these properties were not on board? How would that affect the grant if they just simply didn't want to be part of it?
Well, it's our understanding that I want to say firstly, it is, we appreciate what our museum has done in the location that they're at now. And we appreciate the board, of course, and I've met with the board, a very thoughtful group of people doing an essential task for our community. And we are chagrined, and we think it's unfortunate that the museum doesn't feel it can be a part. Now, we do understand that. The museum has a core mission, and we understand that they, they're going to move on and surface what they feel like is their core mission that they do so well. And so we're looking forward to private entities being involved here. It is our imagination, our understanding that any, assumption that any private entity that were to buy the rails station knows what it is. They're taking into consideration what it is. They're getting in for a purpose. Some of those conversations I think are going on. And we feel like we're going to have good private partners going forward that are interested in what is the mission of the transportation-oriented district. And what we have is a long-term outlook and view for the use of the facility. Again, that European model of functional antiquity that has an appreciation for the historic nature of our community, many of our downtown buildings and areas. So we're excited about partnering with a future entity that may, or individual that may own the building. And I think anybody who is getting into ownership or prospectively looking at ownership of that building would understand and be excited as well about what our mission is here and about engaging with us in the activities we hope to perform with the rail station, which includes major improvements upon it in a functional manner, as well as facade work and other interior work to appreciate the value of that building. So.
It's worked as a dual purpose building since 1987. So
Yeah.
I would assume that we would be able to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, it has been dual purpose for so many years. So.
Yes, and I hope so, because it's a great project, great grant. And as Councilmember Rowe pointed out and City Administrator pointed out, the cents on the dollar, I've been up here for a few years and we get some opportunities, but this is a big one. And I hope those partners will come on board and support it. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
Could I make one more?
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Rowe.
And this is something that Administrator Rath had brought up last night, and I think that this is actually fairly important for the public to hear and remember, that several years ago we had gathered several community groups together to work on the comprehensive plan for the city. And this, in fact, directs to several points that are in that comprehensive plan and meeting our future goals as the community.
Yes, and we are a little bit behind in rolling that out. We've had a little bit of trouble lately on the meeting level there, and we were hoping to things would come around a little earlier on our ability to meet together. It doesn't appear that's going to be the case. So we're going to be rolling that on out and finishing out our work on our comp plan here in July, and trying to have some digital meetings, planning meetings with the different groups that are working with us on it. But yes, it is so central to what are the key facets on a planning level or planning notion that are in our comp plan, because we focused on the center of the city and kind of looking out from that. Start with downtown and look out from that, and complement some of the earlier planning initiatives like River Renaissance Plan that were done by the Legacy Foundation, with many community members being a part of that as well. So we feel good about it.
Downtown Development Plan from 1996.
That's right. Yeah, all the way back to 96, not to mention 2015 with the Legacy Plan. So, we feel like we're tying a knot in things that we've been working on for for a couple of decades here, as far as the planning for our downtown. We probably have look here at our most underused asset with the river, and so many other communities, as Member Myers has insinuated a second ago, have been there already and shelled away, and we hope to kind of do exactly what they've done, both with our infrastructure and with our the amenity of what a river walk can be for our citizens and visitors alike.
And if I could just speak real quickly to Mr. Dolby's comments, the question about, why now, or is now the right time? Next year the grant parameters may change, and this type of project may not fit as nicely with what it is that we're looking at. And so, since we are in a position to be able to apply for a project that fits so well into this particular grant application and get the benefits of a nickel on the dollar, and it fits within the comprehensive plan and the objectives that the city had, I guess, from back even to 96, that is why we're looking to push this forward at this time.
Great comment.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
No, great comment. Any other?
Yeah. I was just waiting patiently.
Go ahead, Alex.
So I guess to reiterate what Phil just said, not only would we be a nickel on the dollar for that anyways, but that's a nickel we would be having to spend. Just reiterating, I know we've already said that, but the money of which the city would be putting in is, again, going into work that we would be having to do over the next 10 or so years, within the next 7 years. Yep. So I think it's important to continuously reiterate, as we're not putting out funds that we would be not putting out otherwise in some fairly short-term planning. Other things I thought were important to reference is, it fits in the comp plan, it fits in the other plans that we've had going since 1996. But over the last few years, we had done the surveying of people who work and live downtown, and safety crossing the Market Street area was something of great concern for people who work at River Hills, who work elsewhere downtown. And of course, the many people who are just trying to bike or walk across that area. I think this is a really critical time for us to improve the safety through there, and a way to get that done. The same thing with where the transit is now, and the safety concerns of people trying to drive through that area. Buses are lined up double wide. This, of course, improves the safety for both pedestrians and people in their cars as well. So I think, it fits into all the planning. It fits into the feedback of which we're seeing safety wise downtown. Also, this area that we're working on is a first impression for many visitors and potential businesses coming into our community. People who are using the transit area is what they're thinking of Ottumwa when they either drive through on the train or stop off. So I think when we're talking economic development, not just for what it could bring for further development in the area, but just what it brings for that impression into our community for potential growth. One question I did have, I know we heard from Mr. Will Hoyt from the Historic Preservation Commission, but I was wondering if one of you could list other groups that have been integral in the planning process and who are supporting the project. I know Trails Commission is one, but if you could list those or provide some of those examples.
We've been engaged with like the Trails Council, obviously for the riverfront, the connection there. We've talked a lot with Andy and his folks, the other folks at CVB and GoPip, and obviously Main Street Ottumwa's been involved from the beginning. We've invited a lot of the county folks to come in. We've discussed it, I know, in private with them from time to time over the last, like I said, year and a half, as long as we've been doing this specific targeted project. Who am I missing?
Indian Hills has been involved.
IHCC has been involved. Ottumwa Public Schools have been involved.
Long outreach to merchants.
I mean, Area 15 and the RPA, which is the transportation planning organization for our 5-county region. So they've been involved. This fits with our long-term transportation planning documents that we've been putting together. I mean, this is just a really nice, really just ties a bow on all the planning processes we've been doing literally for the last, since I was in elementary school. So
Thank you.
The time is now.
Yeah, and I would add too that we on the group that put the grant together really appreciate the hard work and the partnership with Larry Seals, our Public Works Director, has really worked a lot on this with V&K. And when you look at something like Legacy. Yes, and of course Legacy Foundation has been our big partner, and we also have V&A that did our engineering on the side of it with Legacy. Just a lot of partners.
And
Genus Landscaping, who was in our streetscape, worked with us on streetscape, has also worked with some of our design oriented. You saw one of those elements a minute ago on the River Drive element radius there with Main Street. But there's a lot of hard work that went into it with a lot of folks on the city side, like Larry and other department heads looking at this thing and answering questions and going back, especially the Public Works, of course, because we had to, and it, again, important to your point, Member Rowe, is that Public Works had to go back and figure out how we're going to jog these different aspects of the public projects into what we already have planned out. How do we plan this going forward for the next 5 to 6 years, fitting with what were our former plans? So you're jogging the different elements of the public improvements in there to how it makes the most sense, how it can be the most cost effective. Just a heck of a lot of work right there in itself. Larry could tell you for sure. But so there's a lot of work, and there's a lot of planning, and there's a lot of years went into this thing. None of
Kevin,
this
I don't want to be remiss.
is ad hoc.
I think our Parks Department has been very actively involved too. And
Gene
sometimes
Ratchey at our
we
Parks
forget
Department.
the importance of public parks and green spaces for our citizens.
That's right. Gene was in there with that. And
you can throw in the 226 partnership.
Yeah,
You can throw
226.
in, Firestone and the A+ folks across the street. I mean, all those building owners around there have been involved in not necessarily the planning discussions, but at least the tertiary conversations of what do you need and what do you want to see in this.
yeah, and we have the patience of a lot of private owners down in the area that we've talked to, some of whom are going to be part of the Build Grant activities themselves. But we've had a lot of support from the folks down on Main Street in the TOD area itself. I think Some of that's evidence from how successful we're being with Streetscape. Our prosecution of Streetscape has went very well, and people are seeing the benefit of that, I think. But I hope that answers the question.
Okay, I think we've had a good discussion, a lot of questions. Last call, any comments or questions? All right, we have a motion that's been made and seconded to approve the submission of the application for the build grant. Chris, take the roll, please.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Again, thank you, Brad. Thank you,
Thank you.
Kevin. Good presentation.
Thanks, Brad.
Resolution number 91, 2020, resolution fixing date for a public hearing on the proposal to enter into a development agreement with Highlands Development 1 LLC. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 91, 2020.
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Okay, Kevin, you have the floor again.
Thank you, Your Honor. This resolution will establish a time and date for our public hearing in order to consider a development agreement for redevelopment of a former Target building by developer Chris Williams, who is Highland Development LLC, or Highland Development 1 LLC. Sorry. This project will include new VA facilities as well as 2 to 3 potential retail vendors. Overall project investment is estimated at approximately $8 to $9 million. On the private side, the city's TIF rebate incentive for this project is a 20-year term set not to exceed in our contract DA with our developer $3.8 million. The estimated actual TIF rebate value is closer to $2.5 million over the term of our agreement. I would entertain any questions that members may have.
Kevin,
Just a clarification, if I could. It's just to set a hearing date for it, correct?
Yes, tonight we will be setting a time and date for our hearing, and at our next, ideally, at our next meeting, we would be considering on the floor the item.
And I think just some questions I've had from individual council members. We're not to the point of having a development agreement, but when we get to that point, they will have some input specifically on some of the issues that have come up in other projects.
Yes, I'm expecting to receive and forward an executed version of the document for review by council tomorrow.
Good. Okay. Any other questions for Kevin? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Resolution number 98, 2020, approving change order number 1 for beach renovations Phase 4 shade structures installation project. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 98, 2020.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Good evening. We have Parks Director Gene Ratchey. You have the floor, Gene.
Thank you, Your Honor. The City Council approved the contract in the amount of $99,535.70 to ACO Unlimited of Johnston, Iowa through resolution number 234-2019 on October 15th, 2019. This project involves the installation of new designated shade structures around the outdoor pools, complete with new concrete foundations, prefabricated steel framing, and woven vinyl mesh fabric at the beach at Ottumwa located at 101 Church Street. Change order number 1 includes replacement of 10 broken water outlet fixtures embedded in the wave pool concrete floor encountered during the work. Contract completion date of May 15th, 2020 remains unchanged. Change order number 1 increases the contract amount by $9,362.84 for a new contract sum of $108,898.54.
Any questions for Gene? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Thank you, Gene.
Resolution number 99, 2020, approving change order number 1 and accepting the work as final and complete and approving the final pay request for the beach renovations Phase 4 RFP 6X Drainage Improvements Project. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 99, 2020.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented, Your Honor.
Second.
Go ahead, Gene, you have the floor.
The City Council approved the contract in the amount of $22,455 to DC Concrete and Construction of Dowds, Iowa on January 21st, 2020. This project involved new drainage piping along the north wall of the indoor pool facility, directing storm runoff from the pool roof into the storm sewer system. Also replaced approximately 80 lineal feet of 24-inch diameter deteriorated corrugated metal pipe with new PVC piping. Work also included installation of reinforced concrete wing wall at the storm outlet in the lagoon. Change order number 1 finalizes quantities, replaces a panel of sidewalk, and adds a new cast iron frame and grate that increased the contract amount by $781.80 for a new contract sum of $23,236.80.
Any questions for Gene? I think just a comment, it's good that total project, you're still coming in under budget, which is great.
Yes, we have money left over.
Okay, if there's no questions, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Resolution number 101, 2020, placing up to a 1-year moratorium on the sale of city-owned vacant lots, except those deemed appropriate for the building of a new residential dwelling or commercial building while the city's vacant lot policy is revised. Recommendation: pass and adopt resolution number 101, 2020.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Good evening again, Zach. You have the floor.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. The city's vacant lot policy was developed in 2004 and has since been amended several times. We currently allow property owners to buy contiguous property to theirs for green space at a very low rate. The city's in need of residential housing right now. We're looking at some ideas for how to work on infill development, and we're hoping to preserve some of those lots. We've also noticed that the council has been keeping an eye on when they think that lots are buildable and wanting to raise those issues when they've seen those sales come up. What we're asking for in this case is a moratorium for up to 1 year. We're hoping that we'll revise the policy much quicker than that. That would put a moratorium on lots that are at least 50 feet wide, unless they have some other characteristic that makes them unsuitable for development. Smaller lots or lots that have a grade that would make them impractical to build on, things like that, neighbors could still purchase for green space. But we're hoping that at least for a period while we develop a policy to help encourage infill development, that we could put a halt on the other types of sales.
Any questions for Zach?
I have a comment. I'm glad to see you're doing this. I chase these around quite a bit. The only thing I see in here I read were at least 50 feet wide.
Yeah.
Ottumwa has several lots that are 44, 45, 49. I'd like to see that taken on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Rather than just 50 feet.
I think that's a fair point. We reached 50 feet based on a conversation we had at a development meeting, but I think that that number could certainly be changed. It really comes down to what we think are the lots that are buildable and that we want to make sure we have some oversight on. So.
Thank you.
Have you had any input from the planning and zoning on this particular item?
We didn't take this item to the Plan and Zoning Commission, and I don't know that we've shared it with any of those members.
I would advise you to at least share it with them as you get a little further down the road.
They definitely will be part of developing the new policy.
Good.
And we'll also be giving them a heads up that we've done this moratorium.
Okay. Any other questions for Zach? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Resolution number 102, 2020, reallocating funds in the amount of $9,500 in Fund 151 from Department 343 City Housing to Department 561 Healthy Neighbors to be used in support of the 2020 cycle of the Healthy Neighbors Home Improvement Grant and authorizing the Healthy Neighbors Grant Committee to award up to $11,000 for home improvement grants. Recommendation: pass and adopt resolution number 102, 2020.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
You're going to speak? Go ahead.
Thank you. This resolution would allow us to continue the Healthy Neighbors Grant into a second year. This program started last year, and we offered up to 8 grants, matching grants up to $1,000 for exterior home improvements. 8 projects were selected, and 7 of them completed the project. That gave us a remaining balance in that account of $1,500. And we're hoping that with the transfer from the city's housing fund, which this program would be consistent with the goals of the city's housing program, that we could make a moderate improvement in that program. There are a couple of things that we're also going to change to make the program work better. The first is that the council did emphasize in the report on that program in February that we do want to move to a neighborhood focus for the program so we can make improvements that kind of lift up a whole block at once as opposed to spot by spot across the community. And so we're going to be weighing those projects more heavily when they apply this year. The other is that we're moving up the applications. These applications were open until September last year, and a lot of folks regretted that they'd missed a lot of the building season when it came time to finally select the grant awards. We're not going to make any reimbursements until we're into the next fiscal year, but we are going to open up the applications earlier so that we can get more applications so that people can have more time to complete projects. So with those 2 changes and with the $9,500 from the city housing program, we're hoping to award 11 $1,000 grants. These are dollar for dollar matching grants up to that amount for improvements like siding, windows, paint, that make our neighborhoods more appealing, that raise the value of these properties and the surrounding properties. The last thing I do want to just note is that this is money that's been set aside for housing type purposes. Just to emphasize for the folks at home that this is money that was already set aside for the benefit of our neighborhoods, and that this is the responsible way to direct that.
Any questions for Zach?
I would just say I appreciate, I know I was one of the people who's really thought we should move towards the neighborhood targeted approach, knowing that that's really been successful in other communities for this type of approach. So I appreciate seeing that. And I was just wondering if you have other ideas of how to market the program this year to ensure that it's getting out to more people, to more residents.
Right. So a couple of things about the marketing. The first is that for the the journalists listening to the meeting right now, the build grant obviously is a big deal, but we will really need your help to make sure that folks know that this money is available. We're going to have a press release coming out tomorrow morning. We're going to be posting on the city's social media. And one thing that I think will help us really emphasize that this is a good time to look into this program is there's a lot of families that are receiving their $1,200 CARES Act payment right now. And some folks, that's a sustenance thing. That's what they need to make their expenses for the month. But some people who have been able to stay working are thinking about how they can spend that money in a way that improves the community and does what a stimulus is supposed to do. And if we can say, this is an opportunity to stretch that $1,200 into $2,200 to make an improvement for your property and that helps your neighbors out, that I think that's a good sort of niche to get people to think about how they can do those projects. And I know I had to go to Menards for some nuts and bolts this weekend, and there was a line out the door because there's people that are really looking to put some money and put some work into their homes. And I think it's a really good time for us to help them along with doing that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, Your Honor, if I may. I was very skeptical at first about doing the neighborhood concentration thing, and simply because we have a vast, network of neighborhoods in Ottumwa. And I know you evaluate the grants as they come in by, value and worth and need. But I was wondering, when you unroll this grant out to the public, are you going to put or let the public know what areas of focus you're looking for? Because I guess my only concern would be if we had a vast number of people applying for this, and then they weren't aware that we were doing the zone thing or the neighborhood isolation thing. They may feel like, well, we'll never get picked, or how come they didn't pick anybody in my neighborhood, or those types of feelings by the public. Is that something that you'll do, or do you have an idea on how to take care of that issue that might arise?
Yeah, and so what we've done is we've developed an application that you could fill out for just your property, but it's going to nudge you all along the way to who are the neighbors that you're applying with. Do these neighbors have skills? Are you going to work together? What sorts of projects that are small that aren't funded, like new mailbox, are you going to put in? And it's going to kind of nudge people into communicating with their neighbors. And we haven't broken it down where we say that we want to fund, this particular set of blocks. It's just about, can you go out and put an application together with 3 or 4 neighbors? And then when we go to evaluate them, we'll just weigh more heavily that this application has multiple neighbors on it. And obviously with 11 grants, it's a little bit harder to make that all work out. It would be unfortunate, but we might end up in a situation where 5 neighbors apply, but really 3 of those projects have enough merit when it's so competitive. And that'll be a decision that we have to make just because of how tight it is. Obviously, we hope that eventually this type of program can grow. We can find some folks out in the community that would also help us with it. But right now the money's pretty tight at our partners too, so.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you.
Resolution number 103, 2020, approve change order number 2 for the East Main Street Reconstruction Project. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 103, 2020.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Good evening again, Larry. You have the floor.
Sure, I'm on the right item.
H9.
This change order is part of the East Main reconstruction. The following changes are included in change order 2. The survey work was additional survey required to remove the north parking lane of West Vine Street. And that was kind of a value engineering from the beginning of the project to kind of reduce back toward our grant amount. Then the topsoil required to fill in the area that would have been pavement. And then we added some intakes on Vine Street as we developed the Phase 8 Division 1 separation project. We wanted to be able to capture the storm off of Vine and Main Street at that point and not tear pavement out. So we actually stubbed back what will become and be included and picked up in this Phase 8 Division 2. And then we did get into basically just a shelf of highly fractured rock that they had to dig out and actually at places use a breaker to get out of the way to put in the street and the sidewalk. They were at ground level where you see some of the exposed shell against that apartment and against the hill. And then just quantity adjustments to the contract. All forms on East Main project, including pay apps and change orders, are processed through the DOT's Doc Express. That's kind of a new process for us where everything is in their attempt to go paperless. But it adds difficulties for us. And then we come and convert it to the city change orders that was in the original documents. This work was performed in 2019, and one more change order will be required to close this project out and release the retainage. So you see the change order 2 is actually a total deduct of all those items of $52,581.75. So the new contract amount will be $2,826,675.73. So this is a cleanup of all the paperwork on the DOT to the city's process.
Any questions for Larry? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes. Sorry.
Resolution number 104, 2020, appointing UMB Bank NA as the paying agent, note registrar, and transfer agent, approving the paying agent and note registrar and transfer agent agreement, and authorizing the execution of the agreement. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 104, 2020.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Good evening, Kayla, Finance Director. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Again, this is regarding Division 1 CSO project. UMB Bank serves in this capacity for all securities issues for the city of Ottumwa. This is for the $14,115,000 general obligation and refunding capital loan note series 2020. Recommendation is to pass and adopt.
Any questions for Kayla? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Resolution number 105, 2020, approving and authorizing a form of loan agreement and authorizing and providing for the issuance and levying a tax to pay the notes, approval of the tax exemption certificate and continuing disclosure certificate. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 105, 2020.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented, Your Honor.
Second.
The bonds will be used to fund the Division 1 of the CSO and refinancing of the Series 2012 and Series 2013D. Again, this is just for the issuance, levying, and tax of the notes payable and the approval of the tax exemption certificate and continuing disclosure certificate.
Just a question for clarification. Will we get a breakout later when you get that finalized so we can see the amount in each category?
Yes, I can provide that to you.
Okay. Any other questions for Kayla? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Resolution number 106, 2020, recommendation to transfer $116,616.93 to the Bridgeview Center for delinquent payables due to lost revenue related to COVID-19. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 106, 2020.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Holly.
The outstanding payables listed through April 22nd, 2020 was $174,406.98. $31,790.05 of this will be paid by the YMCA for the youth food program. Also, Venue Works has agreed to discount of, and I need to change that to $26,736 for the variable cost invoice, and that is 100% of their variable costs. So the actual total should be $115,880.03 to be paid to the vendors. And that's what we are asking for the approval of tonight to be paid for the delinquent payables. Bridgeview has been asked to give us in detail the payables moving forward for each month, and then we'll be bringing those back to the council.
Just for the record, would you repeat that? I have 115-880-03. Thank you. Any questions for Kayla? This really
Sorry,
is.
that is 93-115-880.93.
Your Honor, I just got a comment. I just want to say, and I won't belabor the point, I still have a huge concern on the where we're going to be at in the future on hotel motel tax. I understand the situation fully, and unfortunate, a lot of businesses are suffering. And so I just wanted to state that for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Delby. We will be hopefully here in the next couple of weeks bringing you more information about our lost revenue for hotel motel and other revenue loss as well, and hopefully have a solution to bring forward for your guys' information and to pass.
And just a point of clarification here, and this is just a reiteration of a past council meeting. By approving this, that will basically deplete that fund balance, correct?
Yes, this is more than that fund balance is, so some of that will have to come out of the general fund balance.
How much of this is actually going to come out of the general fund at this point?
It'll be probably around between 25 and 30,000.
And clearly that was an unbudgeted amount.
Correct, it's not budgeted.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby,
No.
Councilmember Rowe,
No.
Councilmember Stevens,
No.
Councilmember Myers.
Yes.
Okay, motion fails on the vote then. All right, move to the next one, please.
Resolution number 107, 2020, assessing delinquent sewer collection fees on property taxes. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 107, 2020.
Move the recommendation as presented, Your Honor.
Second.
Go ahead, Cal.
We have about a dozen residents. We bill sewer fees that are not connected to the city water. The resolution allows delinquent fees to be assessed to property taxes. There are 2 properties that have delinquent sewer fees totaling $1,059.46, plus an additional $25 in administration fees that is included in this resolution.
Any questions for Kayla? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens.
Yes.
Councilmember Myers.
Yes.
Resolution number 108, 2020, assessing delinquent refuse collection fees on property taxes. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 108, 2020.
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Kayla, you have the floor.
The city council approved mandatory refuse collection fees back in 1992. Placing these fees on property taxes has been an effective tool to assist in collection efforts. A total of 4 properties with a delinquent refuse totaling $714.77, plus an admin fee of $25 for each is included in this resolution. That dollar amount has been changed because we did have someone pay. So again, it's $714.77 that we will be adding on to taxes.
Any other questions for Kayla? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Berg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens.
Yes.
Councilmember Myers.
Yes.
Resolution number 109, 2020, approving additional professional services at the hourly rate scheduled between Veenstra and Kim and the City of Ottumwa for the Build Grant Program. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 109, 2020.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented, Your Honor.
Second.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Seals? You have the floor, Larry.
Thank you, Mayor. City Council approved an hourly rate schedule for professional services between V&K and the City of Ottumwa on May 21st, 2019. During the past several years, multiple downtown partners have developed general concept plans to redevelop the downtown riverfront area. Major components would include continued development of complete streets along Main Street, and this is relation to the Build Grant. Public Works, in conjunction with V&K, developed the cost estimates for multiple proposed street redevelopments, parking improvements under the proposed hourly rate schedule, and this information has been incorporated into the current grant. During the preceding year, multiple versions required additional efforts and increased the required consulting hours in the development and coordination of listed projects. The first phase of the engineering service was estimated to be less or of $24,500, but additional services are estimated not to exceed an additional $5,000 and would be funded through the road use fund balance for a new contract total of $29,500. Regional planning staff, in coordination with Legacy, continue to develop all other needed information such as environmental assessment requirements and the grant narrative and support information.
So I guess this action would increase that hourly rate for work that's been completed and continue to be developed till the final grant submission.
Any other questions for Larry about this? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Burke,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens,
Yes.
Councilmember Myers.
Yes.
Council.
Thank you, Larry. Item J, we also give people a chance to have comments about any item of city business, does not have to be on the agenda. We publish the phone number as part of the process, 683-4581. We'll give a couple of minutes, and while we're waiting, I'll make a couple of comments. I think early in the evening, we talked about the letter or the review by John Hall and Associates on our nutrient reduction program, and a couple of council people did have a chance to visit with Mr. Hall in Washington, D.C., and we also had contact with Sherry Barash, the director for the water section of EPA, and I'm happy to report that recently we were contacted by her directly and asked for some additional information. So just for public input, sometimes those meetings, you wonder if they're really valuable, but it did pay off to have the direct contact. She contacted both V&K and Larry Seals and myself, and we were able to give her some additional information, which helps to justify hopefully more funds from the EPA in the future.
Hello, this is the city council meeting. Can you state your name and what you would like to speak about?
Speaker?
Okay, somebody attempted but didn't get through. The other thing that I think is important to share with the council tonight, and this would be a public communication from the, see if we can.
Hello, can you speak your name, please?
Pardon me?
Can you tell us your name and what you would like to speak about?
Connie Hammersley Wilson.
Go ahead, Connie, you have the floor.
Okay, I just want to take a moment to thank the council for taking a forward-thinking approach in regards to seeking grants for projects and having a vision for our future of Ottumwa, especially in this time of health and economic emergency. So I just wanted to give my thanks and appreciate everyone's hard work and sticking with the program.
Thank you very much for the compliment.
Well, I appreciate you guys. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for calling.
There's been a lot of concern about the ongoing COVID pandemic, and I want to assure the public that Ottumwa, especially the city and Wapello County, that we're working very closely with the county, with the state health department, and the emergency management in these unprecedented times. The city is doing everything we can to continue to provide city services as efficiently and effectively as possible while protecting the health and safety of Wapello County citizens. The city is following the directives and recommendations of Governor Reynolds, the Wapello County Emergency Manager, and our Public Health Department. I have met several times this past couple of weeks with the EMA and the Public Health Department to maintain a pulse on the community spread of COVID-19 in Wapello County and to review local mitigation strategies to implement and flatten the rate of infection. I routinely talk with a variety of local community partners about this development and what's happening with the virus and the changing profile that we're seeing each week. As a longtime resident of the city and as a parent, I fully appreciate and understand your anxiety and concerns for your own safety and that of your family and loved ones. Please be assured that we're doing everything possible to protect our community. We're also sensitive to the individuals who have been tested positively and their need for good care. I want the people of Wapello County to know that the Public Health Department and Emergency Management's directives are the recommendations by the Department of Public Health and orders issued by Governor Reynolds. Many places of businesses and house of worship have reopened with some restrictions. There's still the concern about private gatherings of more than 10 people, which is still prohibited. Social distancing measures are strongly recommended. On behalf of the EMA Commission and the City of Ottumwa, I want to echo those recommendations and strongly urge our community to follow the advice and guidance at this point in time. These recommendations can save lives, and it's our responsibility to do everything we can to help minimize this spread. Some of the best things we can do are: 1, stay home if you are sick. Wash your hands with soap and water frequently. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Maintain social distancing of at least 6 feet between you and others. If you have to go out by yourself. Leave your family at home. Wear a mask when you are out. I personally want to thank the people behind the scene at Wapello County EMA and the Department of Public Health and all the community partners, the long-term care people, and our business community who have been working together behind the scenes to do what's best for our community and to help each other get through this pandemic. We have not reached our peak yet, and I'm sure we'll see continued increase in numbers, but that's partly due to the fact that we are doing more testing. So thank you for the work you're doing, and we'll keep you informed, and we are still doing Thursday night talking points with the city and county people. So we hope that'll add some information for the citizens, and we are bound by certain state laws of what we can release, and I think Mr. Rath mentioned that earlier tonight. So with that, are there any other items that need to come to the attention of the council? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
I have 7:36.